The old diner booth was cold against his skin, the worn leather cracked and sighing under his weight. Outside, the city wept rain against the smudged glass, each drop a blurry star in the neon-soaked darkness. He'd been here for 3 hours, nursing the same bitter coffee, his eyes fixed on the door. She was late. Again. But this time felt different. This time, the silence in his chest was louder than the frantic beat that usually accompanied his waiting. It was a hollow, echoing silence, the kind that comes after a storm has ripped everything away, and all that's left is the quiet devastation. He remembered the first time he saw her. It was in a crowded bookstore, the air thick with the smell of old paper and dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. She was reaching for a book on a high shelf, her fingers just brushing the spine, a small, frustrated sigh escaping her lips. He'd stepped in, a knight in shining armor for a damsel in literary distress, and retrieved the worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude. Her smile, when she turned it on him, was like the sun breaking through clouds. It was a smile that promised warmth, a smile that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't realized. He was invisible. And just like that, he was lost. The chase had begun. It was a relentless, all-consuming pursuit that had lasted for 2 years. 2 years of carefully crafted text messages, of casually showing up at her favorite coffee shops, of remembering the name of her childhood dog and the exact shade of blue she said made her feel calm. He had become an expert in her, a scholar of her sighs and a connoisseur of her laughter. He had molded himself into the man he thought she wanted, sanding down his rough edges, polishing his interests until they mirrored hers, and silencing the parts of himself he deemed unworthy of her affection. He was a chameleon, changing colors to match the backdrop of her life, hoping one day she would finally see him, not as a background character, but as the leading man. But she never did. He was always just on the periphery, a comforting presence, a reliable friend, but never the one she looked at with the same fire he felt for her. He had seen that look in her eyes, but it was always directed at someone else. A fleeting romance with a musician who wrote her a song and then disappeared. A passionate affair with an artist who painted her portrait and then broke her heart. He was the one who picked up the pieces, who listened to her cry for hours, his own heart shattering into a million silent pieces with each tear she shed. And each time a small, hopeful part of him whispered, maybe now she'll see me. But the silence in the diner was different. It wasn't the silence of anticipation, but the silence of resignation. The coffee had long gone cold, a bitter mirror to the hope that had died in his soul. He looked at his reflection in the dark window, at the tired eyes, and the forced smile lines etched around his mouth. He didn't recognize the man staring back at him. This man was a ghost, a hollowed-out version of someone he used to be, his life force drained by a love that was a one-way street. He had chased her so hard and for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to stand still. He had run so far in her direction that he had lost sight of himself. And in the deafening silence of that empty diner, a single, terrifying question echoed in the chambers of his heart. Who was he without her? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, and for the first time he didn't have an answer. The chase was over. Not because he had caught her, but because he had finally, irrevocably, lost himself. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had been so focused on winning her love that he had never stopped to ask if he was truly happy. Was this endless pursuit, this constant state of anxiety and yearning, what love was supposed to feel like? He thought of all the moments he had sacrificed, the hobbies he had abandoned, the friends he had neglected, all in the name of this all-consuming quest. He had built his entire world around her, and now, in the stark reality of her absence, he saw that his world was nothing more than a fragile house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest breeze. He thought back to a conversation he'd had with his grandmother, years ago, before she passed. She had been sitting in her favorite armchair, the afternoon sun casting a golden glow on her wrinkled face. He had been complaining about a girl who hadn't returned his calls, his teenage heart heavy with a manufactured tragedy. His grandmother had listened patiently, her eyes full of a wisdom that seemed as old as the trees outside her window. When he had finished his dramatic retelling of unrequited love, she had smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "My dear," she had said, her voice soft but firm, "love is not a thing you chase. It's a thing you find. And most often, you find it when you're not looking, when you're busy finding yourself." At the time, her words had sounded like something out of a greeting card, a platitude meant to soothe his adolescent angst. But now, in the cold, sterile light of the diner, her words returned to him with a clarity that was both painful and liberating. He had been chasing a reflection, an idea of love that he had projected onto her. He had been so desperate to be loved that he had forgotten how to love himself. He had been so terrified of being alone that he had clung to the hope of her, no matter how much it hurt. But the pain had become his constant companion, a dull ache in his chest that he had mistaken for love. He finally understood that true love doesn't demand that you erase yourself. It doesn't ask you to be a chameleon, to constantly change who you are to please someone else. True love, he was beginning to realize, was about two whole people coming together, not two halves trying to complete each other. And he was not whole. He was a collection of fragmented pieces, all shaped and defined by his pursuit of her. A strange sense of calm washed over him, a quiet stillness that settled deep in his bones. The frantic energy that had propelled him for so long finally dissipated, leaving behind a profound sense of emptiness. But it wasn't a terrifying emptiness anymore. It was a blank canvas, a space waiting to be filled. For the first time in 2 years, he wasn't thinking about her. He wasn't wondering what she was doing, who she was with, or if she was thinking of him. He was thinking about himself. He paid for his cold coffee and stepped out into the rain-slicked street. The city lights blurred around him, a kaleidoscope of colors that seemed brighter, more vibrant than before. He didn't have a destination in mind, no carefully planned route that might accidentally cross her path. He just walked, the rain washing over him, cleansing him of the residue of his obsession. Each step felt like a reclamation, a small but significant act of taking back his own life. The silence that had once terrified him now felt like a sanctuary. It was in that silence that he could finally hear his own thoughts, his own desires, his own long-neglected dreams. He had been so busy listening for the sound of her voice that he had forgotten the sound of his own. He had been so focused on seeing her that he had become blind to the world around him. He walked for hours, the city unfolding before him like a story he had never taken the time to read. He noticed the intricate ironwork on a forgotten balcony, the way the steam rose from a manhole cover like a ghost in the night, the sound of a saxophone wailing a mournful tune from an unseen window. He was a stranger in his own city, and a stranger to himself. And in that moment of profound disorientation, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a very long time: excitement. The journey back to himself was not a straight line. It was a winding, often painful path filled with moments of doubt and the lingering temptation to fall back into old patterns. There were days when the silence felt less like a sanctuary and more like a punishment, when the loneliness was a physical ache that threatened to consume him. In those moments, the urge to reach out to her, to hear the familiar sound of her voice, was almost overwhelming, but he resisted. He held onto the memory of that cold diner booth, the bitter coffee, and the hollow man in the reflection. He remembered the liberating feeling of walking in the rain, of reclaiming his own footsteps. He started small. He revisited the hobbies he had abandoned, the passions he had sacrificed at the altar of his unrequited love. He picked up his guitar again, his fingers clumsy at first, but slowly the melodies returned. He started painting again, not for an audience, not to impress anyone, but for the simple joy of creation. He filled canvases with bold, chaotic colors that mirrored the storm that had raged within him, and with quiet, serene landscapes that reflected the peace he was beginning to find. He reconnected with the friends he had pushed away, the ones who had grown tired of hearing him talk about her, of watching him shrink himself to fit into her world. They welcomed him back with open arms, their laughter and camaraderie a soothing balm to his wounded soul. He had forgotten how good it felt to be part of a community, to be seen and accepted for who he was, not for who he was trying to be. He started to travel, not to exotic, far-flung destinations, but to the small towns and hidden corners of his own state. He would drive for hours with no destination in mind, the open road a metaphor for the new, unwritten chapter of his life. He found beauty in the mundane, in the quiet dignity of a forgotten main street, in the kindness of strangers he met along the way. He learned to enjoy his own company, to find solace in solitude. He realized that being alone was not the same as being lonely. He began to read again, not the books he thought she would be impressed by, but the books that spoke to his own soul. He devoured poetry and philosophy, history and science fiction. He filled his mind with new ideas, new perspectives, new ways of seeing the world. He was building a new foundation for himself, one that was not dependent on the validation of another person. One afternoon he was sitting in a park, reading a book of poetry when he felt a shadow fall over him. He looked up, his heart giving a familiar, treacherous leap, expecting to see her, but it wasn't her. It was a woman he had never seen before. She had a kind smile and eyes that held a genuine curiosity. She pointed to the book in his hands. "Rilke," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "I love his work." They started talking, and the conversation flowed with an ease he had never experienced before. They talked about books and music, about their dreams and their fears. He found himself opening up to her in a way he never had with anyone else, sharing the parts of himself he had kept hidden for so long. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't trying to be someone he wasn't. He was just being himself, and for the first time, it felt like enough. He learned that her name was Clara, that she was a musician, and that she had a laugh that could light up the darkest room. They started spending time together, exploring the city, sharing meals, and talking for hours. With her, he felt a sense of peace he had never known. It wasn't the frantic, anxious energy of the chase. It was a quiet, steady warmth that settled in his chest, a feeling of coming home. He realized that the love he had been so desperately chasing was a pale imitation of what he was experiencing with Clara. The love he had felt for the other woman was born out of a need to be validated, a desire to prove his own worth. It was a love that was conditional, a love that demanded he be someone else. The love he was finding with Clara was a love that was freely given, a love that celebrated him for who he was, flaws and all. It was a love that didn't require him to chase, but to simply be. The silence that he had once feared had become the space where love could grow. It was in the quiet moments between conversations, in the comfortable silence of a shared meal, in the peaceful stillness of a lazy Sunday morning, that their connection deepened. He no longer felt the need to fill every moment with words, to constantly prove his worth. He could just be, and that was enough. He understood now what his grandmother had meant all those years ago. Love doesn't come to you when you are desperately seeking it, when you are trying to force it into existence. It comes when you have made peace with yourself, when you have built a life that is full and meaningful on its own. It comes when you have learned to love the silence, to find solace in your own company. The chase had been a symptom of a deeper problem, a manifestation of his own insecurities and his fear of being alone. By chasing her, he had been running away from himself. And it was only when he stopped running, when he turned inward and faced the emptiness within, that he was able to create a space for real, authentic love to enter his life. He thought of the man in the diner, the hollowed-out ghost with tired eyes. He wished he could go back in time and tell him that it would be okay, that the pain he was feeling was not the end but the beginning. He would tell him that the silence he feared would become his greatest teacher, that in the stillness he would find the strength and the wisdom to heal. He would tell him that one day he would look in the mirror and see a man he was proud of, a man who was whole and complete on his own. He looked at Clara, who was sitting across from him, her eyes sparkling in the afternoon sun. She smiled at him, a genuine, open smile that reached all the way to her soul. And in that moment he knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his being, that he was finally home. The chase was over. The silence had spoken, and in its quiet, gentle whisper he had found everything he had been looking for. This journey into the heart of silence had taught him the most profound lesson of his life. The love we seek from others is often a reflection of the love we are not giving to ourselves. We chase because we feel empty. We pursue because we feel incomplete. We believe that another person holds the key to our happiness, that their validation will fill the void within us. But this is a dangerous illusion, a mirage in the desert of our own self-doubt. The more we chase, the more we deplete ourselves, the more we lose touch with who we are. We become actors in a play of our own making, performing for an audience of one, hoping to win their applause. But the applause never comes, or if it does, it is fleeting, leaving us feeling even more empty than before. The silence is where we are forced to confront ourselves, to sit with the uncomfortable truths we have been running from. It is where we meet our own demons, our own insecurities, our own unhealed wounds. And it is only by facing them, by acknowledging their presence without judgment, that we can begin to heal. The silence is not an absence of noise, but a presence of self. It is the space where we can hear the quiet whispers of our own intuition, the gentle guidance of our own heart. He had spent so long trying to be the man he thought she wanted that he had forgotten to be the man he was meant to be. He had silenced his own passions, his own dreams, his own unique way of being in the world, all in the hope of winning her affection. But in doing so, he had become a stranger to himself. The silence had forced him to reintroduce himself to himself, to rediscover the parts of him he had long abandoned. It was a slow, often painful process of excavation, of digging through the layers of self-deception and fear to find the authentic self that lay buried beneath. He learned that self-worth is not something that can be given to you by another person. It is something that must be cultivated from within. It is the quiet knowing that you are enough, just as you are. It is the understanding that you are worthy of love and respect, not because of what you do or who you are with, but simply because you exist. This was a radical concept for him, a man who had spent his entire life seeking validation from the outside world. He had always believed that his worth was conditional, that it was something he had to earn. The silence taught him that his worth was inherent, that it was his birthright. This newfound sense of self-worth changed everything. He no longer felt the desperate need to be liked, to be approved of. He was able to set boundaries, to say no to things that did not align with his values. He was able to walk away from situations and people that did not serve his highest good. He was no longer afraid of being alone, because he had learned to be a good friend to himself. And it was from this place of wholeness, of self-love and self-respect, that he was able to attract a love that was a true reflection of his own worth. Clara was not a prize to be won, a goal to be achieved. She was a partner, a fellow traveler on the journey of life. Their relationship was not based on need, but on a shared desire to grow and evolve together. They complemented each other, but they did not complete each other. They were two whole individuals who chose to share their lives, not because they were afraid of being alone, but because they enjoyed each other's company. The love he shared with Clara was not a loud, dramatic affair. It was a quiet, steady flame that burned brightly in the background of their lives. It was the comfortable silence of a shared reading session, the easy laughter of a home-cooked meal, the gentle touch of a hand in the dark. It was a love that was built on a foundation of trust, respect, and mutual admiration. It was a love that allowed both of them to be their most authentic selves, without fear of judgment or rejection. He often thought about the woman he had chased for so long, not with bitterness or regret, but with a sense of gratitude. She had been a catalyst, a mirror that had shown him the parts of himself that needed healing. Her rejection had been a gift, a painful but necessary redirection that had led him back to himself. He wished her well, hoped that she would find the happiness she was looking for. But his life was no longer intertwined with hers. He had his own path to follow, his own journey to complete. And so he continued to walk his path, with Clara by his side, the silence no longer a source of fear, but a source of strength. He had learned that the greatest love story is not the one we have with another person, but the one we have with ourselves. And it is only when we have fallen deeply in love with our own soul that we can truly, completely, and unconditionally love another. The chase is a distraction, a detour from the real work, which is the journey inward. It is in the quiet sanctuary of our own hearts that we find the love we have been so desperately seeking all along. The silence is not an empty space, but a space filled with possibility, with potential, with the promise of a love that is more profound, more meaningful, and more lasting than any we could ever chase. Do you find yourself in the echo of his story? Are you tired of the chase, of the endless pursuit of a love that seems just out of reach? Do you feel that hollow ache of a love that is not reciprocated, of a heart that gives more than it receives? Perhaps it's time to stop running. Perhaps it's time to embrace the silence. What would happen if you put down the phone, if you stopped checking their social media, if you redirected all of that energy you've been expending on them back to yourself? It's a scary thought, isn't it? The silence can be deafening at first, but I promise you, if you can sit in that silence long enough, if you can befriend the solitude, you will discover a strength and a peace you never knew you possessed. You will begin to hear your own voice again, the voice that has been drowned out by the noise of your own wanting. You will rediscover the passions and the dreams you have put on hold. You will remember who you were before you made someone else the center of your universe. And in that remembering, you will begin to heal. You will begin to rebuild yourself, piece by piece, not for them, but for you. And when you are whole again, when you are so full of your own love that you are overflowing, that is when the right love will find you. Not because you were looking for it, but because you became the kind of person that true love is drawn to. So I invite you to try it. For 1 week, stop chasing, stop reaching out, stop seeking validation, and instead turn that attention inward. Take yourself on a date, read a book you've been meaning to read, spend time in nature, reconnect with old friends. Do something that makes your soul sing and see what happens. You might be surprised at the magic that unfolds when you finally let go, when you finally stop chasing love and allow it to find you in the silence. If this story resonated with you, if you felt a flicker of recognition in his journey, let me know in the comments below. Share your own stories of chasing and letting go. Let's create a community of people who are committed to finding love within themselves first. And if you're ready to continue this journey of self-discovery, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because our next conversation will be about the subtle signs that the universe is telling you to let someone go. You won't want to miss it. Remember, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. Nurture it, cherish it, and watch as the rest of your life transforms in the most beautiful and unexpected ways. The silence is waiting for you. Are you ready to listen?